Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. It really is shaping up to be the most wonderful time of the year. We are heading towards the altitude camp, towards the 100 meter sprint, towards the Tour de France, towards whatever you want to call it, of the cyclocross season. It's the Christmas period, 11 races in 16 days, and we have a full house today to take a look ahead at that. As always, joining me is Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And then we also have Eurosport commentator Jez Cox on today. Jez, thank you for being here.
Hello guys, nice to be here. My pleasure. Merry Christmas.
So, let's first get to know you a bit more, Jez. What do you prefer commentating on, a rainy race or a fast race?
Oh, this is good. Fast race, because rainy race is always going to cause me problems with seeing who the riders are. But that's just me.
Then, what about the courses? What's your favorite course on the circuit?
Oh, do you know what? I absolutely love Namur. I wasn't commentating at the weekend on it, which was a shame. I commentated on the European champs there. I just think it's got everything and there's so much room for things to go wrong. No, that's awful, but I love that.
Namur, definitely a very good choice. Certainly ranks in my top 3 as well. In fact, we're going to get so many great races this Christmas period. Let's first take a look at the schedule because, as said, it's absolutely packed. We're going to get 11 races starting this weekend with Hulst and Zonhoven, the World Cups. Then on Monday we get the Super Prestige in Mol. This race is taking the place from Heusden Zolder, which is organizing the Belgian Championships. Then there is a short rest for Christmas dinners, but on Boxing Day the World Cup returns to Gavere for the 3rd year in a row. The next day, the Exactcross heads to Loenhout. After a one-day break, the World Cup is back with the round in Besançon, France. A quick turnaround for most riders, as on the 30th, the night race in Diegem takes place, and then after New Year's Eve, the season, New Year, is actually opened by the X2O Trophy in Paal. After a rest of one day, we hit the final sprint with Kokzijde, Gullegem and Dendermonde rounding out the Christmas period. And as always, the question in this time is, it's great for the fans, but riders are complaining a bit about the schedule. It's too packed, everything except Loenhout is in a classification this year. We need to make choices. We don't like making choices because we like making money from the overall prize money from all these series. How do you guys look at that? Issam, Jez, is it too busy, or is it also just a matter, well, just deal with it, this is what it is?
You know, I think that it's definitely the weight of the calendar is really on that period, and I think that the influence that it can have on classifications is, quite big. And if you miss out on certain races due to illness, or which is something that can happen in this period of time, or an injury that you picked up at Namur, I think that it influences quite a lot, and it hurts your season in such a way that it doesn't really matter that much what you did before. I think that it is just maybe a little bit too much. I would have loved to see a little less in terms of the big classifications. I think that it could have been better if some individual races would have been put in, maybe also abroad, instead of only focusing on Belgium itself. I think they can give a little bit more room to organizers that want to, do it in Switzerland, for example, or France. We have Besançon in as a World Cup, but I feel that, the way it was back in the day, there was a little bit more room for Swiss races as well. Italian races could get their go as well during that period, because it is a busy period. Most of the people have time off, and so for organizers, it's obviously a great moment of the year to organize a race, but it's just right now it's almost impossible to get in there. I think I would like, preferably for myself, to see less classifications. I think that the World Cup really tried to, put their stamp on this period, and really wanted to have a lot of their races during this period, which I can understand from a financial point. But I think for the sport and for the riders mainly, I think it's maybe a little bit too much at the moment.
It is a lot, isn't it? I mean, Issam, you've just referenced injury, and obviously Elisabeth has got injured right at the beginning of this period with this recurrence of his back injury. Sticking with the men, we know that Niels van der Putte has been ill, didn't race at the weekend, so maybe he's got his illness out of the way at the beginning. But I guess it depends how you consume your cyclocross, because I think, as we know, you've referenced it there, Issam, so many people have time off over the Christmas and New Year period. So going to watch cross, as you guys both know, is, and I I'm kind of doing myself out of a job here, but it's the best way to consume it. Yes, our coverage on television is fantastic, and it's nice to sit at home in your warm, heated living room and watch, whatever it is, snow falling, mud everywhere, hacking rain, and all the rest of it. But nothing beats being there at the trackside. And I think the opportunity with so many of those races in Belgium, the opportunity for people to come out and enjoy them when they've got time off is crucial. There comes a point where we're well over halfway through the cross season, really, aren't we? I know we carry on into end of February, March, but really in terms of the big classifications, if I look down at my master sheet, which gives me all the big series, we're well over halfway, all of them except for the World Cup, but that will catch up over the next couple of weeks. I had this conversation with Helen Wyman on air on Saturday when we were covering the X2O from Herentals, and she made a really good point that by this time in the season, in terms of those classifications, we almost need to stop worrying about who's leading or who's catching up in the X2O, who's leading in this series. I know some of them don't have an overall series, but Super Prestige, who's leading in that, and who's going to challenge them. And there comes a point where all these riders, because it's most of the riders all doing the same race, Helen made the point that actually most of the elite riders just go race to race. It's just another race. Yes, it might be a World Cup and then it's a Super Prestige on the Saturday, but those classifications are often only relevant really to us and the organisers. To the riders, it's just the same riders, the start line, a finish line, and a different course. And she says that they're not thinking so much about, right, okay, tomorrow it's a different series where I'm not going for the over. They just literally rock up to the next start line and start it, whether it's an exact cross, whether it's a Super Prestige or a World Cup. So, but I know, I don't, from my perspective, I've got loads of commentaries over the Christmas period as well. So I certainly don't want any of it disappearing. And I guess we'll see the impact of, I mean, that is the problem for people like Elias Abitz we've referenced. He's going to be out for quite a bit of time and he suddenly misses loads. And we've got 2 World Cup races back to back this weekend. So it is, it's tricky. And it's the same for the women. One of the things that we often don't talk about is the impact of a woman's monthly cycle on this. It's not often talked about, but I'll gladly talk about it. If a woman's period falls on the killer weekend where you've got 2 World Cup races, for a lot of women, that means that weekend they'll be operating at a much lower level than they would be normally. And me as a commentator, I watch that and I'm always aware of it. You never know. But to sit there and say, oh, she's hopeless this week. I don't know what happened to her. She's 10 places behind where she was. And it is one of those things we need to take into account that impacts women in a way that it doesn't with men. And actually, just literally a calendar slot in one rider's monthly cycle could massively dent their World Cup chances overall. Compacting it like that means that injury, illness, changes in how your body's feeling can have a massive impact on the season as a whole.
Yeah, exactly, because it's so compressed. It just takes one thing, like you mentioned a couple of examples, Iserbeat or like Cameron Mason. He's been sick. If he comes in a bit undercooked now, it's very hard to recover from that in this period. And I think the point you mentioned about scheduling definitely holds to quite big extent. So indeed, the riders will just treat it as a race, but where you'll see the differences is when they are forced to make choices in such a packed period, they will look at, okay, so where am I out of the classification? And then I will just skip those races. So especially on the women's side, where the X2O trophy is wrapped up by Brandt, you will see many riders thinking, well, I don't necessarily need to do Poel. It's a very demanding race. That's not for me. I don't necessarily need to do Koksijde because it's Super Prestige and World Cup the day after. And you'll see the same for Zweek. He will definitely start Koksijde because that's a great course for him. But Zweek, I wouldn't count on him showing up in Poel. And that also refers to just the planning of this period. That's something you mentioned, Issam. Like in the past, there were some more far away races from a Belgian perspective, the foreign races as the Belgians call it. But we have Besançon now, and I'm actually not a fan of the date that Besançon has, because you know that the whole world comes to Belgium at this point. And that's not just the elites, that's also the juniors, the junior women, the men under 23. We have nearly 90 juniors registered for the World Cups this weekend. And instead of giving them an easy week stay somewhere in Belgium for another World Cup, they need to travel all the way to Besançon. It's a financial drain, it's a logistical drain for federations which don't have a lot of cyclocross budget. In the past, you had Civelle in this period, but that was in the final weekend of the Christmas period, and that made a lot more sense, right? So you did a bunch of races in Belgium. The week after New Year was relatively easy, And then you went to Civelle. I remember Bart Wellens and Geert Wellens taking a 1-2 there at some point. Those scheduling things would help make it easier. Over the past years, this period has become busier and busier because the financial advantage from organizing here has increased. It's the good bridge to make to the schedules of Van Aert and Van der Poel. They've been released. Van der Poel definitely a bit later than what the team first told us, but Van der Poel is committed to a number of races. He's doing 11 races, mostly around the Christmas period. Starting in Zonhoven, then Mol, Gaveren, Loenhout, Besançon, Baal, Kokzijde, Dendermonde. Then he will make a return for the World Championships with Maasmechelen and Hoogerheide, a step up for a record-tying 7th world title in the men's elite category. Of course, Marianne Vos has 8 women elite titles, so that's the absolute record. Van der Poel schedule's out. I mean, exciting news, right? And maybe a bit more than what was anticipated. In the Belgian media, Niels Albert wrote a column. I hear Van der Poel will race 3 races. Benidorm, Hoogerheide, maybe Maasmechelen, and Worlds. He's not doing much more. People were getting worried because it was taking so long. But then here it is, right? A decently packed schedule. In what form do you think that Van der Poel is going to come in here, Jez? Do you think he's going to destroy everyone in Zonhoven like he did last year in Herentals? Or will we see an even more cautious approach in form to minimize the impact for his road preparation?
We'll find out. I mean, if you watch his Instagram, he seems to be training well, but you never can tell. It's carefully curated, isn't it? Particularly with guys of that level. There'll be social media managers and what have you. They're in charge of what you see. So we won't know. I think it'll be interesting to see. In a way, guys, I'm more interested to see the reaction of the other riders that we've been talking about week in, week out, alongside him, how they raise their game or how they take on even just the start and then settling into the first few laps, that kind of thing. Look, we all know he's arguably the greatest male cyclocross rider of the modern era. It, I guess, depends whether there's been any shift in his classics focus for the beginning of the season. I mean, we've already seen what with Tom Pidcock moving to Q36.5. I'm guessing it's primarily his decision, but the team will be involved, I'm sure, as will his sponsors and what have you, and Red Bull maybe, in deciding to really focus fully on the classics. That's him, though. We know that barring any kind of last minute changes, he's not riding cross. But I wonder whether there has been any kind of pulling on Van der Poel to put even more focus. I mean, can you use the races he's listed as effectively winter training? If he can and he's at his usual level, it's depressing. I mean, you've seen the comments in the last week from, I think it was Van Turenhout, I may be wrong, you guys will know, saying, look, these three even, have had more coverage than any of us put together. So, I'm not quoting directly, but it's something along those lines, wasn't it, in the last few weeks, than any of us are getting, and we're winning the races. And one of those big three that's getting all the coverage, even doing any cross this winter. So, in a way, we're right to talk about it. People will be expecting us to on the pod here. From me watching, I really hope they have a fight on their hands with the likes of Michael Van Turenhout, Laurens Sweeck, Elisabeth, should he get well, that kind of thing, because that's what we want to see, isn't it? We all love seeing a bit of dominance, yes, but we want to see a good battle.
So, of course, that's the paradox, right? The racing without Van der Poel is, in my opinion, way better because, yes, it's fantastic to see Van der Poel showcase his skill. He is a machine. It's fantastic to look at him. The way he can ride through the sand, the way he can shoot himself up hills, saves, it's great. It's breathtaking. But at the same time, I also watch cyclocross because I like the dogfights. I like a race like we had in Namur. I like a race like we've seen many of this season. Merckxplas coming down right to the wire to the final lap, fighting for positions. And we don't usually get that as much with Van der Poel. Of course, 2 seasons ago, we had that fantastic season where almost every race ended in a great battle with Van Aert, and that was great to see. But last year, he dominated. He only lost that race in Benidorm. I feel like every year ahead of the return of Van der Poel and Van Aert, it's the same type of conversation, right? Like, oh yeah, Van Turenhout has looked great, so maybe he can force a challenge this year. And I caught myself with that same idea for Zonhoven. Well, Sweeck, he looked really good last weekend. Maybe he can challenge Van der Poel. And I want to believe in it, but I also have this nagging voice in the back of my head, right? Like, well, I hope this, but every year look at Van der Poel, he's really raised his level, because Issam, feel free to jump in here, but compare this to 2019-2020 Van der Poel, right? Then he came in before those European Championships in Civel, and he seriously had a hard time beating riders like Iserbyt, and it felt like he was more human, and since then he's improved massively both on the road and in cyclocross. Really, the gap between him and the full-timers has increased, especially if you consider the fact that Van der Poel doesn't race cyclocross with the same intensity of preparation as he did before.
I definitely think the progress that he has made over the years, overall, but in cyclocross as well, has been quite huge. And I feel that we can definitely expect that he is going to be a little rusty in the first couple of races. That's something that we have seen a couple of times already for Van der Poel, so it's not going to be a huge surprise. I think he has the key to how the races will play out. If he feels like going from the start, if he gets the room to do so, and he puts on a pace where the others just look at him and be like, I'm not going to follow that, because if I do that, I will blow up. Well, then obviously it's going to be a different type of race, and Van der Poel will just go and we will see him at the finish line. It depends on his form as well, how he comes in, because he was talking about that he felt like his peak was a little bit earlier than the World Championships that were last year in Tabor, and he felt that he need to optimize that a little bit for this year with Liévin coming up. So I think that is going to be probably the most interesting thing, the form in which he returns and the way he's going to race. If he really wants to and has the ability to put them under pressure from the start, I think it's going to be a very difficult couple of races for the others to bring up a fight to Van der Poel. I think in terms of level, look, I think if Van der Poel just has the level he had last year, I don't think any of the riders will, on a good day, they could bring up a fight, and Van der Poel has to have a bad day in a way. But we have seen it. It's not something new. The difference is there. Look, it's going to be interesting to see how he returns, how he comes back, and how he will race. And I think those are some of the elements that will play a role into him racing. I think, don't forget, cyclocross is a sport where the first lap things can happen, mechanicals, crashes. These are all things that play a role, and I think that could also play a role in his racing and the way he races. So it's going to be interesting, and we're going to enter these races with some question marks, and they will be answered probably the first race he will join back the field, or maybe in the second, but it will be interesting for sure.
So it's important to note that in Zonhoven he will be starting on the third row, as the first two rows of the call-up are done by the World Cup standings. He's obviously not in the top of that ranking, but it definitely won't take long for him to reach that. He is second, no, he just dropped to third actually on the UCI ranking, so his UCI points base, that's definitely not an issue, unlike 2 seasons ago. But all I can think about is last year, because last year before Herentals there were these same talks, and I was somewhat inclined to believe them. Maybe this year Van der Poel will come in at a lower form level, and we'll see. But all I can think about from that race is this side shot from the athletics track, and he just fired a missile. He attacked from the back of that group, overtook them, shot up the ski hill, and he was gone. And I also don't really believe him that he said, well, my peak was too early in the season. I'm not really inclined to believe that, because at those World Championships, the dude just stormed off. Issam, we were there on the ground. He was long gone and could just cruise and chill, and maybe he didn't have the feeling on the day, but in reality, he never really was in any sort of difficulty in any race apart from Benidorm, and in Benidorm he had a mechanical in the first lap, and then he stormed to the front and crashed in the final lap. So he had a dominant season last year, and I don't want to spoil the party, but as you say, things can happen, but just based on his reputation, I feel like we also need to put some respect to the 6-time world champion and also admit that he is a clear cut above Van Toerenhout and Zweek. And maybe, as you say, maybe if Gavere is super muddy and Van Toerenhout has a great day, he can come close. I would certainly love to see it. Or Toon Aerts, for that matter, on that course. And maybe Zweek can capitalize on the rustiness of Van der Poel, because that is a valid argument. Van der Poel needs 2-3 races to really settle in. We've seen that many times. Maybe Zweek can capitalize on that in Zonhoven, which is a great course for him. I certainly look forward to it, but ultimately I would, with full confidence, expect that Van der Poel at the end of the season has a lot of ones behind his name and also has a 7th rainbow jersey in cyclocross in the closet. His rival, eternal rival, some would say, Wout van Aert, has also announced his schedule. I think we covered that a few episodes ago, but it wouldn't hurt to briefly mention that. He's doing 6 races, Mol, Loenhout, Gullegem and Dendermonde in the Christmas period, and then Benidorm and Maasmechelen. There's been some speculation that he would potentially race the World Championships, but really I feel over the past week the team has closed the lid on that and said, well, you never know, but it's really not in our plans, only if it goes extraordinarily well. I feel after that Vuelta crash there was some lingering damage. It took some time for Van Aert to rebuild his endurance base. It's something that he does, as he says, out of love for the sport. And like you saw last year, it's not really his priority at the moment to win those races, and not racing the World Championships fits perfectly with such a season, because last year we saw him at frequent occasions also not be able to easily finish second or not finish second at all. So what are your guys' expectations for Van Aert?
Do you know what? I think it's probably a good thing for him, Noah, that he's coming in and people, like you've just said, are talking about him with lowered expectations. That can only be a good thing, I think, for him in terms of just having a little bit of pressure off as well. As you say, it will be interesting to see how well he's recovered from that crash. I mean, he's had really a season and a half, nearly 2 seasons now, of kind of just not quite being himself. And if anything, I think most people would probably admit that he's lost a little bit of that sheen, particularly in the shadow on the road of the likes of Tadej Pogačar, of being one of the invincibles. You know, in a way that Mathieu van der Poel hasn't quite. I mean, what Van der Poel did at the Road World Championships last year on a course where he was not expected to perform was quite remarkable, and we haven't seen that kind of, emperor-like performance from Wout van Aert either in cyclocross or on the road in some time. And I do think that might be a good thing for him in terms of taking the pressure off. And as you say, he evidently loves cross in a way that Van der Poel does as well. We're right to talk about it because it's just about to happen, isn't it? We've got them both coming in just one before the other. It does draw away a little bit from an extremely open women's field at the same time where we've got a fascinating battle between 4 or 5 women at the top as well. You know what I would say, guys, and you'll think I've gone completely bonkers here, but this is my style, right? I'm going to chuck this in to you now because I've got a feeling about this. I think the reason that Wout van Aert and Mathieu van der Poel are talked about so much isn't necessarily because of their history in cyclocross. Yes, of course it is. I don't classify those two as sort of history-defining cyclocross riders who just happen to also be very good on the road. I think they are world-class, obviously, generationally gifted peddlers of bicycles. I suspect if you spent enough time with either one of them on the track, they'd be one of the best 6-day riders of the modern era. Yeah, they are machines at turning pedals on bicycles. Here's something for you. I want to see what you guys think. 2 or 3 big races before the World Championships, you bring in a Slovenian entrant called Tadej Pogačar. You get him on the grass. You just do a bit of practice on the hurdles, on the planks, and you chuck him into the World Championships. How does he do? Because I think he'd do very well. I think you've seen his bike handling. I think he is one of those guys. I am. Put it out there. There's my challenge. Tadej, are you listening? This is what I want to see. But it just goes back to what I'm saying about those two. They are era-defining peddlers of bicycles, whether it's on the road, whether it's on the sand, wherever it is. And I would be willing to bet that if you chuck Tadej Pogačar early enough on a cross bike or 2 this winter, he'd be right up there. What do you think? Tell me, I'm very happy for you to tell me I'm completely wrong, but I'll bet he would be.
So there's 2 things to this, right? So if we just pull him cold and put him into Benidorm and then Hogerheide and Worlds, he gets lapped. He raced the Slovenian Open Championships, and he was losing to an amateur rider the first year. He only won that race because that guy had a mechanical, and then the next year he didn't win, and that amateur guy won. But the other way to look at this is through the angle of Sven Nys, who we interviewed on the podcast about 2 seasons ago. He said, well, if Pogačar actually makes work out of it in a similar way like Lucinda Brandt made a big goal out of working on her technical abilities, if you give me 2-3 seasons to actually make him a cyclocross rider, he will do really well because he does have a certain feeling on the bike. So I agree that he is a great rider, and I also agree that the reason there's so much attention about Van Aert and Van der Poel, and really after this we are going to move to the women because that is wide open, but the reason so many people talk about them are because they are the superstars of the sport, right? They are the big names, they've gone on to bigger things, and I remember last year maybe 2 years ago, there was a good column in Dutch newspaper NRC, really from an analytical angle, just these people have outgrown cyclocross. They are the superstars of the road, they are the champions of Flanders, they're the champions of Roubaix, they are the world champions on the road, and they have a huge fan base, and that's the pull factor, not necessarily because they make the racing that much more entertaining. But Issam, what do you think about Pogačar?
He is a great cyclist, and he's a legend in the making, if not already a legend. But I think for cyclocross, we should not forget that, for Van Aert, he was a pure cyclocross rider. So he went through the ranks as a junior and under 23 and became an elite rider. And I think that is an advantage that those guys have, the experience as well, that for Pogačar is going to be so difficult to catch up on. As you say, he would definitely need at least 2 seasons to be somewhere at a level that he could fight for a top 5 or a top 10. But it depends on the intensity. How serious will he take it? And does it fit the program? I think that when he gets a little older, I think that he can definitely give it a go. But at the moment, obviously, the Grand Tour riders have their way of spending the winter. And sometimes they like the sun a little bit more than the mud and the rain and the cold weather that we have in Belgium and the Netherlands sometimes, and also in France or other places that we go. I think, of course, like Benidorm, for example, would be something that he could be doing relatively well. I don't think he will be lapped there. But if we go to a race like Zonhoven, I think that is just going to be a cultural shock for him when he goes into the Kuil. And he sees the speed of the riders, the way they enter it. I think for him, that's just going to be such a weird experience. But I think that is an experiment I would love to see in a way. I would love him to try it out and do a couple of World Cups just for fun. And maybe if he likes it, he can take it a little bit more serious. Who knows what comes out of that? But I think for now, it would already be very nice to see if he's going to be able to join a couple of races this season or next season. That would be quite a story, to be honest.
And it would certainly draw attention to there. And as I mentioned, Brandt is a rider who has fully made that transformation from road rider to cross rider. Of course, she'd been in cross a bit more than Pogačar, but Brandt this week shared on their Instagram story some clips from the 2017-18 season. I think it was from Overijssel, where she kept crashing, and Herreicher said something about, this is one of the worst technical riders I've ever seen. She keeps just taking the course out of the ground. She's destroying it. And then she posted that from nearly 10 years later, where we are now, that off camber in Namur, that was something really special by Brandt. And we've seen it before that clearly her confidence is there. She isn't scared, and probably that's also why she crashed so many times early on when she really picked up the full cyclocross season, because she was never scared. She would always send it down the hills. I also remember that from the Valkenburg World Championships where I was. She went over the bars a few times. Also on the Friday practice, she was drilling it down the hill. I was like, oh, take it easy. And then you saw Prevot, who is like known to be a mountain bikester. I thought she would really thrive on that course. But then you had Brandt, and Brandt just, despite being technically inferior based on her confidence, that sent it down there. And Prevot had a really bad race there, and Brandt was in the mix, and I think she won the bronze medal there behind Compton and the winner Kant. So Brandt is definitely a rider who's been on form. She's been up there all season, but we should be in for a very open Christmas period. Alvarado, the winner in Namur. Van Empel, the world champion, winner in Herentals. Peters a third in her first race. Do you expect to see a clear, quote-unquote, winner? Somebody who puts in a streak here, chains together a number of wins? Or will we see the winners being substituting each other? So this course suits Van Empel better, she takes the win. The next day it's Alvarado, the next day it's Brandt.
I'm kind of expecting at some point Van Empel to get it together. It's been so completely different to last season, where she raced all the way through and only had 2 races she didn't win, which was, ridiculous. It's made it more exciting, far more interesting to watch this year. But she seems to be tripping over herself at the moment. She's making mistakes that she wasn't making last year. So maybe we can assume from that the form isn't as good, or there's something not right, and she's then trying too hard and making mistakes. My feeling is at some point over the next 3 to 4 weeks, ideally for her the next week, things will click. And as we know, if they do click, she could win all of the Christmas races that she's doing. It's interesting to see how much stronger Blanka Vas was on Sunday. I wasn't expecting that improvement quite so soon, because she didn't start the season brilliantly, the Hungarian, but she's looking really good. And it's nice to see the youngsters as well really pushing as well. The result on Sunday was evident of that, with Petersen, Vash and Schreiber 3rd, 4th and 5th. So it's just so healthy at the moment, the women's elite field. There's so many potential winners in there, more so than the men's side, which actually pre the big 2 coming back is still quite exciting and mixed in itself. But I've loved seeing it. And I think, that's my hint, is that at some point it will click for Van Empel. It might be that she closes out the second half of the season with that consistency of last year and then goes on to win the Worlds again. And it was as you were. Issam, what do you think?
No, so I think for Van Empel, it definitely was a season with up and downs at the moment. And she is struggling in a way. I think it could be because of, the way she entered the season with the form. I think they are trying something different compared to last year, where, they try to avoid the dip that she had and try to build it up towards the World Championships and have a very good form along the entirety of the season. You could argue that is not completely the case at the moment, because we have seen the downs in a way. I feel that this is the period where he has to kind of work for Van Empel. If it doesn't work now, it's going to be quite difficult also mentally in a way, because we have seen that for her that's also an area that is so important for her, at least, because I haven't heard many athletes winning so many races last year and still come in with the idea that it could be the day that I'm going to lose, despite the fact that she has been so dominant. It needs to work out right now, and I'm not gonna lie, I think the races that are coming up are not going to be they have to work from the get-go. I think especially a race like Hulst, if you miss out at the start and it doesn't go your way at lap 1, and you have to chase, you have to get in a certain rhythm at Hulst. And Zonhoven is a bit similar. It has some tricky sections. It is a difficult course. And next to that, I think it's going to be interesting what Petersen will do in terms of her shape. We got with Namur a course that suits her very well, and she did very well for her first race. But now we are starting, and we have to see where that will go, because there is not much room for her where she can improve in the next couple of races. It will, they will go back then on a training camp if they will do or do not do the nationals, and then from there on, it's basically the road to the Worlds, which they already kind of started, but it will intensify at that point. And with Brandt, I'm not gonna lie, before we started this season, I did not expect Brandt to be on this level. I thought, she is someone that has been in cyclocross for a while already, as you point out, Noah, and she has been working very hard on her technical abilities. But she's also a rider with, that is starting to become almost a veteran of the women elite category, and that could catch up on her, but it didn't so far. And she is someone that is just genuinely someone that can win on a good day and bring up the challenge. And that off camera at Namur, I'm still speechless about that, especially the last lap passage, the way she got so close to Alvarado. That I haven't seen many do that the way she did. The confidence that she had, the way she entered it as well, the entry speed was quite high. that was evident the way she has been improving over the last couple of seasons technically. I think there it was kind of shown the progress that was made, but obviously over the course of the season already she has been improving quite well. So on the women's side, I think if Van der Poel is going to make it boring, I don't think we're going to have many boring races on the women's side. I think that's going to be quite interesting and fascinating to watch.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely going to be highly entertaining to watch these races. When will it click for Van Empel? I think it's a bit too early now over the Christmas period. The courses this weekend don't particularly suit her. I think her advantage is that she will have this longer training camp because she likely won't race national. She's gonna really use that moment to fine-tune her form, and then, once we get to that part of the season, Benidorm, Hoogerheide, great courses for her. The World's course this year is also really good for her. So that's really where I see Van Empel. And if I need to give you one race for her this Christmas period, I would probably say Coxside. Her sand riding skills are quite good, and she's dominated there in the past as well. Van Anrooy, I would say, is an even better sand rider, but she, of course, isn't there this season. For Brandt, I would say if you give me one course this Christmas period, it's going to be Gavre, right? Heavy climbing, lots of mud, a couple of downhills where she can really take every risk in the world. Probably doesn't crash there, but that downhill in Gavre with that big air cushion, that's no joke. That's perfect for Brandt. Alvarado is really the most well-rounded rider, I feel, from the front runners. She doesn't have that many weaknesses. Of course, technically she's fabulous. I feel if I need to give you a race for her, I would probably say Hulst. I think that's a good race for her, but I mean, she's shown this year she can do it on any course. So the one thing that you will notice is differences in scheduling. So, for instance, Pieterse, she is not going to do Besançon, but she will do Diegem. Brandt will likely race almost everything. I don't think she will do Loenhout, and I don't think she will be attending Besançon. There was some speculation about that, but maybe because of the Cabras cancellation, that plan has been altered. She is leading the World Cup after all. So for Brandt, definitely the race days will start counting towards the end. Dendermonde also a really good course for Brandt. Pieterse kind of in the same boat as Alvarado. They can do it on pretty much every course. So we should be in for an exciting period. And to jump in on something Jez said a bit earlier, there's a second tier of riders, right, that is not too far behind. Blanca Vache, Gavre is a good course for her. She can really use that to her strength. Zoe Backstedt, Namur was not a course for her, but we are getting Dendermonde, the course of her first World Cup podium. That is a place where she can do well if it's muddy. Marie Schreiber, Zonhoven is a good course for her. Think Coxside as well. She is quite good through the sand, if I'm not messing her up in my head at the moment, but those are courses where we can see things like that. Casasola didn't have a good outing in Namur, but Baal is a good course for her. Gavre, also a good course for her. Flat Dendermonde, if it's muddy, also a good course for her. And I think that will be highly entertaining to see. So the second tier riders, okay, in the end, Vache didn't just have it in Namur, but it was promising and she was up in the mix, and that's also what makes these races so entertaining. I think if we funnel it towards the end now, this weekend Hulst and Zonhoven, we can maybe make a few predictions here. Start with the racing in Hulst. Absolutely massive field. The women's field is almost at its maximum. 98 women elite. Can you imagine lining up on the back row there, Issam? Who is your prediction for the women's race there?
I have to say I haven't thought of it, but just the numbers of entries for those races is insane. It's incredible. But I think we are entering a period now where a lot of riders are going to, as you say, it's a lot. A lot of races are focused in Belgium, so a lot of the riders are coming to Belgium, and then for them it's a lot easier, to pick up the races that are available on the calendar. So if you talk about positives, by the way, of the calendar, I think that is definitely one. The riders have the opportunity to really focus on one area and still have quite a lot of races that they could join. In terms of predictions for Hulst, if Namur went well for Van Empel, I would have definitely said Van Empel, because I was expecting her to be somewhat on her A game, especially after the way she raced in Aerts. But then Namur didn't go well, so I think a Alvarado win would not be a huge surprise, and that's mainly just because she's going to get so much on the course that suits her well. And as you said, she's probably one of the most all-round riders that we have at the moment. I think that if Van Empel on her best day is maybe just a little bit better because she can compensate that. But technically, I think Alvarado is really good. So I would say that Alvarado could potentially take a win. And then we could maybe see a podium with Brandt and Van Empel, despite the fact that I might want to put Pietersen in it. But I think that Van Empel could, be in the mix somewhat, and I don't want to give up right away. I think that it would be good for her if she's in the mix.
Well, I definitely agree with Issam that Brandt will be on the podium, and I think actually looking at those two World Cup races back to back, Hulst and Zonhover, I think she'll be on the podium in both of them, Brandt. But I think I watched back the highlights again from the Namur race just before we started the pod today, and I think that Van Empel might watch that herself a number of times and watch the crashes, watch the mistakes she made, or the mistakes, slip-ups, problems. And I think she's going to be motivated to put that right. And I wouldn't put it past her winning both this weekend. In fact, that's what I'm going to predict. Van Empel bounces back and starts this 3 weeks of dominance. It would happen last year. It's in her. She's another year older. She's still so young anyway. That's what I think is going to happen this weekend. Brand will be on the podium both times. And so will Celine Del Carmen Alvarado. I think actually both days we could have quite similar podiums as we get into that kind of rhythm of two World Cups back to back.
That's definitely not a weird thought to think we'll see similar results. I do think that in Hulst it will be quite critical that Brandt doesn't mess up her start. It's happened too many times this season, and she can certainly not allow that to happen in Hulst. Yes, the course has been altered. The start-finish is in reverse compared to last year. Yes, there's a bit more time before you hit that first bottleneck, but there will always be this annoying off-camber. The barriers are there. If you're not in position there, you're going to lose significant time. Hulst is then also not a particular easy course to pass riders. So that's definitely something that needs to change. Brandt needs to avoid those same mistakes. Zonhover, a bit of a different story, but I will think for Hulst that we would see an Alvarado win ahead of Pietersen and Brandt, and then in Zonhover we get a slightly different result with actually Brandt winning ahead of Van Empel and Alvarado. Then I think just to wrap it up, we can also maybe do some predictions quickly for the men's races. In Hulst, I will be going for who would be a good winner. We didn't really talk about them here, the full-time cross riders, since we've extensively covered them over all the other podcasts. But in Hulst, I think we will see somewhat of a bounce back of Thibaut Nys. He's going to finish third. Second place is going to go to Van Toerenhout, and the win is going to go to Sweeck. Whereas in Zonhover, Van der Poel will beat Sweeck, with third place going to Niels van der Putten.
Hulst is going to be a close one, I think. I think there are going to be quite a few contenders for that one. Hard to predict as well. I would say that Van Toerenhout is at the moment the man to beat, and I feel that he is definitely going to be someone that when it gets tactical, he knows he always somewhat finds a way. And if you take him to the last lap, him or Iserbyt could be a danger. Iserbyt obviously most likely is not going to be there, so then I think that I would think that Van Toerenhout is definitely going to be a danger. Thibaut Nys needs to somewhat bounce back from what wasn't really a particularly great weekend. I think that he definitely could be in the mix, but it's all about rhythm and the momentum, and it's not there at the moment. To make it short, Van Toerenhout, I would say Van der Putten, and I'm really searching for a third one. I don't know, actually. I don't know who I would put on a podium, but I think the third one could be maybe a surprise. I think that it's definitely going to be a toss-up on the men's side, especially for Hulst. I think that's going to be an interesting race.
You should go for Viseur.
Let's go with Viseur. I have been hyping him up a little bit, and I think that he is definitely a talent that could turn it up on a course like Hull. So let's go with that then.
And he wasn't bad in Namur, right? He was in the top 10.
He was absolutely in the mix, and that could definitely be someone that, when he gets his opportunity, he can be in the mix. We have seen it already a couple of times this season. It wouldn't be a surprise if it would happen again in Hulst.
Yeah, good pick to mention Wasura, because as you guys have mentioned on the pod the last few weeks, he is so unpredictable, isn't he? And still emerging, really. So to see where he will, I don't think any of us probably would put it past. It would be a surprise, but it wouldn't be remarkable if he were to win one of those 2 World Cup races this weekend, just purely through that unpredictable nature. Issam, I think I know who that third person was that you couldn't think of. And we're going to the Netherlands on Saturday to Hulst. Lars van der Haar. We haven't mentioned him. We've barely mentioned him, have we? And for that reason, I'm going to pick Lars van der Haar as my winner at Hulst, ahead of Michael van Turenhout and a resurgent Niels van der Putte. And then Zonnever on Sunday, back in Belgium, Michael van Turenhout rallies again and gets yet another win. But that will be the end of this purple patch that we've seen him in the last couple of weeks. I think that will be it. And then he'll be very consistent, as he always is, but I don't think he'll be winning as much as he has done. He'll be the winner on Sunday ahead of... I might put Lars van der Haar back on the podium as well, sort of buoyed with his victory from the day before, and Laurens Sweeck on the podium too, in third. I'm always wrong. So whoever I've picked, unfortunately, now won't win. That's my history.
We are always wrong. Sometimes we are right, but we never look back on those because we know we are sometimes so wrong. But that's the fun of it, I guess. Predicting is always a tricky thing, and we're just await the race, and then from there on we analyze it again.
Exactly. That's the nice thing about being a pundit, right? We can predict something and then it doesn't happen, and then we can just put on a different hat and explain why it didn't happen and why something else happened. We should be in for some good racing. I think that will wrap up this episode of the Cyclocross Social podcast. Issam and Jez, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We will be back this weekend. I will be on the ground in Hulst and Zonhoven, covering the races. Some long episodes coming because it's also the Youth World Cups. So hopefully you're ready to listen to plenty of yapping from me and Issam. Thanks for listening, everyone. Catch you guys soon. Goodbye.